Earlier in the service, I mentioned all the ways we use the word face. Facebook, FaceTime, face mask, face-to-face. And we also have that expression, facing our fears. That theme comes right at the front of this week's Torah portion. What does it mean to face one's fears, and how should one face one's fears? I'm thankful to my sister for sharing some of the teachings that come through Walter Hertzberg from the Jewish Theological Seminary. He walks us through a guide of the many ways that commentators and interpreters throughout the ages have tried to explain a repetition in the text, or what seems to be a repetition in the text. So a reminder of the scene. Jacob is on the run from his brother Esau. Jacob knows he has done wrong by his brother Esau. And he's told that Esau is on his way, heading in Jacob's direction, with 400 men, no less. And then the text says, Vayira Yaakov me'od. Jacob was very afraid. Jacob was terrified. That word yirah is what we're going to talk about tonight. That would have been enough. That would have explained Jacob's fears, but the text goes on to say, vayetzer lo, that he was anxious. So the question is asked, is this just a repetition? Is this just a matter of emphasis? Or are there different categories of fears? Or is there cause and effect, that one kind of fear can lead to another kind of fear? So let me share just one or two possibilities with you. The most well-known of all of them comes from Rashi, the 11th century biblical sage giant of a commentator. And he says that there is a distinction between fear and anxiety for Jacob. The fear, the first, was fear that he might be killed by his brother or by this army of men. The anxiety was that he, Jacob, might kill another human being in his own self-defense. I had a chance to study this interpretation years ago with someone who had been a soldier in the IDF, and I admitted that I had never really understood what these distinctions were that Rashi was making. And he said, I know exactly what he was talking about. Going into battle, fearing that I will be killed, and fearing that I might kill. A much less extreme dual fear, I believe, is known by all of us in the last 20 months or so, where we fear that we might be exposed to coronavirus, and we also fear that we would expose others, God forbid. There is that dual fear, and I've seen how that has been a driving force in many of the decisions that people have made about what to do and what not to do, where to go and where not to go, whose company to keep, whose company not to keep. And some of those decisions have come with a lot of pain and anxiety between generations of a family. So that might be one explanation for the language in our parsha about yirah. Then comes another possibility, which is from the Malbim, from the 19th century Russian biblical commentator. And he says these two words are cause and effect. One fear led to another fear. How does it go? This is actually a theological statement. In last week's parsha, God said to Jacob, Al tirah, do not fear, fear not, don't be afraid. In the command form. And yet, here Jacob is terrified. When Jacob realized that he had not fulfilled God's command, that he hadn't put his full trust and confidence and faith in God who would protect him. Then came a second kind of fear, which was fear that there was doubt or flaw in his faith in God. As a rabbi, I want to say, I don't think this kind of fear is helpful. I think beating ourselves up for being afraid can lead to a dangerous spiral. I don't think it's psychologically healthy. I don't think it is theologically healthy. The psalmist says, Yisrael betach badonai, that Israel, Jacob, had faith in God. Israel, the people, the Jewish people, trust in God. And we should try, but when we fall short of that, we shouldn't fall apart. And certainly we shouldn't use God as, our faith in God as, God forbid, a way of forfeiting our own responsibility for our lives and for the care of those we love and for this world, for that matter. So we should trust in God, we should trust in the future, we should be hopeful, we should plant seeds, not knowing whether or not they will grow. But if our faith should fall short, that should not lead to greater distress or anxiety. And I'll share one more of many commentaries here. There is the Bechor Shor, the 12th century French sage, who says that Jacob was afraid because he didn't know what to do. And so he vacillated between two fears. If I choose this path in response to Esau, then I'm afraid it will play out this way. And if I choose this path in response to Esau, then I fear it will play out this way. And if my brother comes at me this way, I'll be afraid. And if he comes at me this way, I'll be afraid. With these intentions, with those intentions, any which way, I'll be afraid. So the Bechor Shor sees that this vacillating, this being overwhelmed by all the decision-making that a person has to make, that in and of itself can lead to fear. I am currently the president of the Toronto Board of Rabbis, and I feel responsible for looking after my colleagues during this stressful time. I know rabbis across the city and cantors, to be sure, and presidents, to be sure, are working day and night to steer our Jewish community to safety and to success. And so I invited Dr. Betsy Stone, who is a therapist and a coach for rabbis and educators. And I said, what can you do? What can you offer the Toronto rabbis that might bring some comfort? And she said, I can talk about decision fatigue. So it was just a 30-minute session, but it was terrific. And if you find yourself feeling that you have decision fatigue, I want you to know you're not alone. Right? When Adam asks me, what should we have for dinner tonight? I say, you decide. Whatever the kids want, I don't care, right? Dr. Stone says that we should also buy time when we can. To say, if we're confronted with a decision, we can say, I'm going to think about that and I'll get back to you tomorrow. Or you can say to yourself, I'm going to sleep on that and I'll decide tomorrow. Well, Jacob wanted to sleep on it. And that was, it seems, a good strategy. So the commentaries go on and on. If you want to learn some more with me tomorrow about this dual fear, please join me and fellow congregants for Shabbat morning Torah study at 9 o'clock tomorrow. This is just a taste. Let me say in conclusion that the word yirah is translated as fear. It is also translated as reverence and awe. So Jacob can be for us this week a figure who found his way from fear to awe, from terror to reverence, from distress to wonder. And that, I would say, there are two sides of the same coin, two translations, two meanings of the same word, and two sides of the same coin. So whenever we should feel a fear or an anxiety rising up in us, we might ask, how can I turn this moment into a moment of awe and reverence for the world, for God who made it, and for all the possibilities and potential that are ahead of us? Shabbat Shalom.